It was a name that echoed through the generations, whispered in hushed tones around campfires and in the safety of warm homes. The name alone was enough to send shivers down your spine, a chilling reminder of the unknown lurking just beyond the familiar paths. A name that sent shivers down your spine, the stories told of a place where the trees seemed to close in on you, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was always thick with an eerie mist, and the forest floor was carpeted with leaves that crunched underfoot, masking the sounds of unseen creatures. It was a place of shadows and secrets, the kind of secrets that were better left buried, or so the elders said. They spoke of ghostly apparitions that wandered the woods at night, of strange lights that flickered in the distance, and of whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Legend said if you listened closely, you could hear the whispers of the dead. These whispers were said to be the voices of those who had ventured into the hollow and never returned. Some claimed they were warnings, others believed they were cries for help, but all agreed that they were not to be ignored. Evelyn wasn't like the other kids. She wasn't afraid. While the other children would run away at the mere mention of Whispering Hollow, Evelyn's curiosity was piqued. She had always been different, more daring, more inquisitive. She wanted to understand the world around her, and Whispering Hollow was a mystery she was determined to solve. Curiosity burned in her eyes. It was a curiosity that had gotten her into trouble more times than she could count. But it was also what made her who she was. She had heard the stories, of course, but she didn't believe in ghosts or curses. She believed in facts, in evidence, and she was determined to find the truth. She wanted to know the truth about Whispering Hollow. She wanted to see for herself if the stories were just that, stories. She had spent countless nights lying awake, imagining what she might find. Would she hear the whispers? Would she see the ghostly apparitions? Or would she find nothing but an old, forgotten forest? One crisp autumn evening, she made up her mind. The air was cool and the leaves had turned a brilliant shade of orange and red. It was the perfect night for an adventure. She packed a small bag with a flashlight, a notebook and a few snacks, and set out towards the edge of the village where the forest began. She would go to Whispering Hollow. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement as she stepped onto the path that led into the woods. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the fading light of the day. She took a deep breath and pressed on, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She would face the whispers. She would confront the legends head-on, and she would do it alone. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the mist began to thicken and the air grew colder. She could feel the weight of the stories pressing down on her, but she refused to turn back. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took.
I'm not scared.
The other kids dared her.
Don't do it, Evelyn.
They warned.
It's cursed!
Evelyn just smirked.
I'm not scared,
she declared. She held her head high, a mischievous glint in her eyes. The setting sun cast long shadows, the wind rustled the leaves. It sounded like whispers. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped into the woods. The path was narrow and overgrown. Thorns scratched at Evelyn's arms, but she pressed on, drawn deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, the light faded. Strange shapes seemed to move in the shadows. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't turn back now, not with the whispers growing louder. They seemed to beckon her forward.
Evelyn? Evelyn?
The whispers slithered through the trees. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Evelyn stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The whispers were faint, like the rustle of leaves, but they sent chills down her spine. They spoke her name. They knew her. A cold dread crept into her heart. She wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. Ahead, she saw it. A giant, weeping willow, its presence both majestic and eerie. The tree stood alone in the forest, its massive trunk and sprawling branches creating an almost otherworldly silhouette against the dim light of the setting sun. Evelyn had heard stories about this tree, tales whispered among the villagers about its mysterious powers and the strange occurrences that surrounded it. She had always been curious, but now, standing before it, she felt a mix of awe and trepidation. Its branches drooped to the ground, forming a curtain of leaves that seemed to sway gently, even though there was no breeze. The leaves rustled softly, creating a sound that was almost like a whisper, as if the tree itself was trying to communicate with her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and stepped closer. The whispers seemed to be coming from within. Evelyn approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself was trying to hold her back. She could feel the eyes of the forest on her, watching her every move. The stories she had heard played in her mind, tales of people who had ventured too close and never returned, but she was determined to uncover the truth. The air around the willow felt heavy, oppressive. A thick mist began to form, swirling around the base of the tree and rising up to envelop its branches. The temperature seemed to drop, and Evelyn shivered, pulling her coat tighter around her. The mist was dense, almost tangible, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. She could feel the energy emanating from the tree, a strange, almost magnetic force that drew her in. A strange energy pulsed from the tree, a rhythmic thrum that resonated deep within her. It was as if the tree had a heartbeat, a steady, powerful rhythm that matched her own. The glow around the tree intensified, casting an ethereal light that made the mist shimmer and dance. She felt a connection, a bond that she couldn't explain, as if the tree was calling out to her, inviting her to discover its secrets. She reached out a hand to touch the rough bark, her fingers trembling with anticipation. The bark was cool and rough under her touch, and she could feel the energy coursing through it, a vibrant, almost electric sensation. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before, a connection that went beyond the physical. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her, and listened to the whispers that seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. As soon as her fingers made contact, the whispers intensified. They were no longer just a soft murmur, but a cacophony of voices, each one distinct yet blending together in a haunting symphony. She could hear words, phrases, fragments of stories and memories all swirling around her in a dizzying dance. It was overwhelming, and she felt a surge of emotions, a mix of fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of belonging. They swirled around her, pulling her closer. The mist thickened, wrapping around her like a shroud, and she felt herself being drawn towards the tree. It was as if the tree itself was reaching out to her, its branches extending to embrace her. She could feel the pull, a magnetic force that she couldn't resist. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead, and stepped forward, ready to uncover the mysteries of the weeping willow. Evelyn peered into the heart of the willow. There she saw them, faces trapped within the bark. Their eyes were filled with a deep, unending sorrow.
Help us, set us free.
Evelyn took a step back, fear gripping her heart. These were the souls lost to Whispering Hollow, trapped within the willow forever.
Join us, Evelyn. Become one with the Hollow. You will never be alone again.
Their voices were seductive, promising an end to her loneliness. Evelyn hesitated. The whispers spoke to a part of her that longed for connection. She had always been different, an outsider. Maybe here in Whispering Hollow, she could finally belong. Evelyn took a step closer to the willow. The air around her seemed to thicken, as if the tree itself was drawing her in. She could feel the ancient energy emanating from the towering branches, a silent invitation that was impossible to resist. The willow stood like a guardian of secrets, its long, graceful tendrils swaying gently in the breeze, whispering tales of old. She reached out her hand, her fingers brushing against the rough bark. The texture was both familiar and foreign, like touching the past and present simultaneously. Each groove and ridge seemed to pulse with life, a heartbeat that matched her own. She felt a connection, a bond that transcended time and space, linking her to the countless souls who had stood in this very spot. A jolt of energy surged through her, electrifying her senses. It was as if the tree had awakened something deep within her, a dormant power that had been waiting for this very moment. Her mind raced with visions of the past, glimpses of lives intertwined with the willow's existence. She saw faces, heard voices, felt emotions that were not her own but were now a part of her. The whispers grew louder, engulfing her. They were not just sounds but messages. Stories of love, loss, and longing carried on the wind. Each rustle of the leaves was a voice, each sway of the branches a gesture. The forest was alive with a symphony of whispers, a chorus that called to her soul, urging her to listen, to understand, to join. She closed her eyes, surrendering to their call. In the darkness, behind her eyelids, the whispers became clearer, more distinct. She could hear the individual voices, each one telling its own story, yet all part of a greater narrative. She felt herself being drawn into their world, a realm where time had no meaning and the boundaries between self and nature blurred. The faces in the bark seemed to smile, their expressions a mix of welcome and knowing. They were the guardians of the forest, the spirits of those who had come before her. Each face was a testament to a life lived, a story told, a soul that had found its place among the trees. They were not just memories, but living entities, part of the eternal cycle of life and death. Her screams were swallowed by the willow. The sound was absorbed into the tree, becoming part of its essence. It was as if the willow had taken her fear, her pain, and transformed it into something else, something beautiful and eternal. The tree stood as a silent witness, its branches cradling her anguish and turning it into a song of the forest. Her fear, her loneliness, replaced by a chilling emptiness. It was not the emptiness of despair, but of peace, a void that was filled with the presence of the forest. She felt herself dissolving, her individuality merging with the collective consciousness of the trees. She was no longer alone, but part of something greater, a vast network of life that pulsed with energy and purpose. She was one of them now. Her essence intertwined with the willow, her spirit becoming part of the forest's eternal song. She felt a sense of belonging, a connection that transcended her mortal existence. The forest had accepted her, welcomed her into its fold. She was no longer just Evelyn, but a part of the ancient chorus, a voice in the symphony of nature. The next morning the sun rose on a silent, whispering hollow. Evelyn was gone. Only the whispers remained, a constant reminder of the hollow's hunger. The curse continued. The willow stood, a silent sentinel, waiting for its next victim. For the whispers never truly die. They wait, they watch, and they whisper, waiting for the next soul to wander into their embrace, just like Evelyn.